Have you ever wondered why the people who love you the most seem to ignore you at times? It feels confusing, even painful. But what if I told you that real love isn't always about constant attention? It's about growth, space, and trust. Let's break the myth today and uncover the truth about deep, enduring love. Have you ever felt like the person who loves you the most is also the one who ignores you the most? It's confusing, isn't it? You start questioning everything. Do they still care? Did I do something wrong? Why are they pulling away? But let me tell you something. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it steps back, not because it's absent, but because it's growing. You see, when someone truly loves you, they don't just focus on making you feel good, they focus on making you become good. And that's where the challenge begins. Love is not about constant validation. It's not about always being available. It's about knowing when to step close and when to step back. Because real love doesn't just hold on, it lets go when necessary so you can develop, so you can discover who you really are. Think about a parent raising a child. At first, they hold their hand at every step, but eventually they let go. Not because they don't care, but because they do. They know that if they never step back, the child will never learn to walk on their own. And the same applies to relationships. The one who loves you a lot might ignore you a lot, not because they've lost interest, but because they want you to grow. They want you to become stronger, more independent, more capable of standing on your own 2 feet. They know that if they're always present, always giving, always fixing, you might never realize your own strength. But here's the problem. Most people don't see it that way. When someone we love takes a step back, we panic. We assume they've changed, that they've stopped caring. And instead of understanding, we start accusing. Why are you so distant? Why don't you call me like before? Why aren't you always around? But what if their distance is not a sign of rejection, but a sign of responsibility? What if their silence is not neglect, but a necessity? What if their absence is not about leaving you, but about leading you? See, real love isn't about attachment. It's about assignment. It's not about just being there. It's about preparing you for what's next. And sometimes that means giving you space to grow. The ones who truly love you will challenge you. They will stretch you. They will even frustrate you. But they will never leave you unprepared, because love is not about making you dependent. It's about making you strong. But here's the question. How do you know the difference? How do you recognize when someone is stepping back out of love or stepping back because they're actually leaving? How do you tell the difference between a test and a goodbye? That's where we're going next. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Have you ever noticed that the people who truly love you aren't always the ones chasing after you? They don't always call first. They don't always check in every moment. They don't always shower you with attention. And you start wondering, do they really care? If they love me so much, why do they seem so distant? But what if I told you that real love isn't proven through constant presence, but through consistent purpose? You see, love is not about being available 24/7. Love is about being intentional. And when someone truly loves you, they are not just focused on making you feel loved. They are focused on making sure you are prepared for life. They are not just giving you their presence. They are making sure their absence doesn't break you. And that's where the challenge begins. Because we've been taught to measure love by attention, But real love is measured by intention. And sometimes intention requires distance. Have you ever heard the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder? It's true. Sometimes love needs to step back so that you can recognize its value. When someone is always available, always present, always doing everything for you, you start to take them for granted. You don't even realize how much they contribute to your life until they take a step back. And the ones who love you deeply, they understand this. They know that if they are always there, you might never see what they truly mean to you. So sometimes they ignore you, not to hurt you, but to help you see what you're missing. But let's be honest, we don't like that. We want love to be comfortable. We want love to be easy. We want love to always be right there when we need it. But listen to me carefully. Real love is not always comfortable, but it is always necessary. Real love does not always give you what you want, but it will always give you what you need. And sometimes what you need is space. Sometimes what you need is to stand on your own. And the ones who love you the most will step back, not because they don't care, but because they care too much to let you stay the same. But here's the challenge. Most people mistake this for neglect. They confuse seeking with abandonment. So when love steps back, they run. They push people away, they start assuming the worst, and instead of recognizing the purpose behind the distance, they let their insecurities take control. And that's how so many people lose the very thing that was meant to help them grow. So the question is, how do you respond when someone who loves you steps back? Do you panic? Do you chase them? Do you push them away completely? Or do you take a step back yourself and ask, what is this trying to teach me? Because love is a teacher. And if you don't understand its lessons, you might fail the test. But before you can answer that, we need to uncover something deeper. Why does love test you in the first place? That's what we're going to talk about next. And trust me, you need to hear this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you love suddenly becomes distant? They stop texting as much. They don't call like they used to. They seem preoccupied. And you're left wondering, what changed? Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? But what if I told you that sometimes distance is not a sign of disconnection? You see, love is a powerful thing, but it is also a complex thing. We expect love to always be warm, always be present, always be expressive. But real love speaks in many languages, and one of those languages is silence. Yes, sometimes the people who love you the most will go quiet, not because they're ignoring you, but because they are processing something bigger. They might be facing battles they haven't told you about. They might be dealing with struggles that they don't know how to share. Or maybe, just maybe, they are giving you space to grow into the person you're meant to be. The truth is, the deeper the love, the more complex the emotions. The ones who truly care about you are not always the ones shouting their love from the rooftops. Sometimes their love is expressed in the quiet moments, in the way they trust you to figure things out, in the way they let you stand on your own, even when it's hard. Because real love is not about constant reassurance, it's about confidence. It's about knowing that no matter the distance, the connection remains. But here's the problem. Most people don't understand this. We've been conditioned to think that love must always be loud, always be obvious, always be obvious, always be obvious. So when love becomes quiet, we assume something is wrong. We start overthinking. We start doubting. We start searching for problems that don't even exist. And in doing so, we push away the very people who were never planning to leave. Let me ask you something. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever pushed someone away simply because they weren't as expressive as you wanted them to be, because they weren't constantly proving their love in the way you expected? If so, then maybe, just maybe, you misunderstood the language of their love. Maybe they weren't pulling away. Maybe they were trying to show you something different. Maybe their silence was not a sign of less love, but of a deeper love. A love that trusts, a love that believes, a love that doesn't need constant words to exist. But how do you know the difference? How do you know when someone's distance is a test or a warning? How do you know if they're stepping back to help you or because they're actually letting go? There's a fine line between love that strengthens you and love that's slipping away. And if you don't learn how to recognize it, you might end up losing the very thing that was meant for you. So how do you tell the difference? That's exactly what we're going to talk about next. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. Have you ever felt like someone you love is speaking a different language? Not with words, but with actions. They don't say much. They don't always express their emotions the way you expect, but somehow you know they care. And yet, because it's not obvious, because it's not what you're used to, you start questioning it. If they really love me, why don't they show it more? Why do they act distant sometimes? Why do they seem so hard to read? But what if I told you that love has a language beyond words? You see, most people think love is about constant reassurance, about daily affirmations, about grand gestures. But real love is often quiet. Real love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it speaks in ways you don't immediately recognize, because love is not just about making you feel good, it's about making you become better. And sometimes the people who love you the most express that love in ways that are hard to understand in the moment. Think about this. Have you ever seen someone push you to be better, even when you didn't want to? Have you ever had someone challenge you, hold you accountable, or even give you space when you thought you needed their presence? And at first, it didn't feel like love. It felt like distance. It felt like they were ignoring you. It felt like they didn't care. But later, you realize that everything they did was for you, not against you. That's the language of deep love. It doesn't just give you what you want, it gives you what you need. But here's the problem. Most people miss this. They expect love to always be soft, always be easy, always be full of attention. And when love speaks a different language, one of silence, of patience, of letting go when necessary, most people mistake it for indifference. And because they don't recognize it, they reject it. That the person you thought didn't care was actually showing love in a way you didn't appreciate at the time. If you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Real love is not just a feeling, it is an action. And sometimes that action is stepping back, not because they don't care, but because they care enough to let you grow. But here's the real challenge. How do you learn to recognize this kind of love before it's too late? How do you train yourself to see love when it doesn't look the way you expect it? How do you make sure you don't reject the very thing that was meant to build you? That's what we need to talk about next. And trust me, this will change the way you see love forever. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who once gave you all their attention suddenly seems to pull away? They don't call as much. They don't text like before. They seem distant. And you start wondering, what's wrong? Did I do something? Why are they acting this way? But what if I told you that sometimes when love steps back, it's not because it's fading, but because it's growing? You see, love is not just about being close. It's about knowing when to give space. And the people who truly love you, they understand something most people don't. Love needs room to breathe. It needs time to evolve, to mature, to develop into something stronger. And sometimes that means stepping back, not to abandon, not to ignore, but to allow growth. Think about a seed planted in the ground. You don't see it grow immediately, do you? It's buried, it's hidden, it's silent. But beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. It's developing roots. It's getting stronger. It's preparing for what's next. And if you dig it up too soon, if you keep checking on it, if you don't let it have time, you actually stop its growth. The same is true with love. Sometimes real love steps back, not because it's gone, but because it's taking root. But here's where most people go wrong. They mistake space for separation. They assume that if someone isn't constantly proving their love, then love must not be there. They panic, they start chasing, they try to force connection instead of allowing it to grow naturally. And in doing so, they actually push away the very thing they're trying to hold on to. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone pull away from you, and instead of giving them space, you reacted out of fear? Maybe you sent too many messages. Maybe you demanded answers. Maybe you even accused them of things that weren't true, only to realize later that they just needed a moment, that they were never actually leaving. If so, then you understand this mistake. Real love doesn't always require constant attention. It requires trust. Trust that even in the quiet moments, even in the distance, even when things don't feel as close as before, the love is still there. But here's the real question. How do you tell the difference? How do you know when someone is stepping back to let love grow, or when they're stepping back because love is fading? How do you learn to recognize when space is healthy and when it's a warning sign? Because there's a difference. And if you don't know how to see it, you could end up holding on to something that's already gone, or letting go of something that was actually meant for you. And that is exactly what we need to talk about next. Have you ever found yourself wondering, are they stepping back because they love me, or are they stepping back because they're letting go? That's the question that keeps so many people up at night. When someone you care about starts pulling away, your mind starts racing. Is this temporary? Are they testing me, or is this the beginning of the end? But what if I told you that love and loss can sometimes look the same, but they are not the same? You see, when someone truly loves you, they might step back, but they never step out. They may give you space, but they never disappear. They may go silent for a moment, but their presence in your life is never completely erased. Because real love doesn't just leave without explanation. It doesn't just fade without clarity. Even when it needs space, even when it needs time, reality remains connected. But when someone is actually letting go, when their heart is no longer in it, their distance doesn't create growth, it creates gaping holes. Their silence doesn't build anticipation, it builds confusion. And if you pay attention, you'll feel the difference. But here's where most people struggle: fear. fear blinds them. Fear of losing someone makes them ignore the signs. So instead of seeing the truth, they start making excuses. Oh, they're just busy. They'll come back when they're ready. Maybe if I just wait a little longer, things will go back to normal. And in doing so, they keep holding on to something that's already slipping away. They refuse to accept that sometimes distance is not about love growing, it's about love ending. So how do you know? How do you tell the difference? Pay attention to consistency. Someone who truly loves you will never completely disappear from your life. They may become quiet, they may give you space, but they will still check in. They will still show up in ways that matter. They will still have a presence, even if it's not as constant as before. But someone who is letting go, their distance is filled with avoidance. They start making excuses. They start responding. They start treating you like an option instead of a priority. And deep down, you feel it. You know when someone's heart is no longer in it. You just don't want to admit it. Let me ask you something. Are you holding on to someone who has already let go? Are you waiting for someone who has already made their decision? Because if you are, then maybe it's time to stop waiting for clarity that has already been given. Maybe the silence you've been struggling with is not a test, but an answer. But here's the real challenge. What do you do when you realize someone is actually letting go? How do you respond? Do you chase? Do you fight? Or do you learn how to let go with peace? That's what we're going to talk about next. And trust me, this might be the most important lesson yet. What do you do when you realize they're not coming back? What do you do when the silence is no longer a test, but an answer? When the space they created wasn't to let love grow, but to let love go. That's the moment that hurts the most. That's the moment when your heart starts fighting with your mind. Maybe I should reach out. Maybe if I just do one more thing. Maybe if I just hold on a little longer, they'll change their mind. But what if I told you that holding on to someone who's already let go is not love? It's self-destruction. You see, the most painful truth about love is this. Not everyone who comes into your life is meant to stay. Some people are seasonal. Some people were never meant to be permanent, no matter how much you wanted them to be. And the biggest mistake you can make is forcing someone to stay when their heart has already left. Because love is not something you have to beg for. It's not something you have to chase. Real love is given freely. And if someone has to be convinced to love you, they don't truly love you. But here's where most people go wrong. They confuse attachment with love. Just because you miss someone doesn't mean they were meant for you. Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's good for you. And just because it hurts to let go doesn't mean you should hold on. Pain is not always a sign to keep fighting. Sometimes pain is a sign that it's time to move forward. So let me ask you something. Why are you holding on to someone who has already moved on? Why are you waiting for someone who has already made their decision? The longer you hold on to the wrong person, the longer you delay the right person from coming into your life. Because every time you chase someone who doesn't want to be caught, you lose a piece of yourself. Every time you beg for love that isn't being freely given, you forget your own worth. And let me tell you something. You are too valuable to be an afterthought in someone else's life. Letting go is hard. I know it's painful. It feels like something is being torn away from you. But sometimes the thing you're afraid of losing is the very thing that's holding you back. And when you finally release it, when you finally accept that some people are not meant to stay, you make room for something greater. something stronger, something that doesn't require you to fight for a place in someone's life because it was meant for you all along. But here's the real question. How do you let go? How do you heal? How do you move on without looking back? Because knowing you need to let go is one thing, but actually doing it, that's something else entirely. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next, because your healing starts now. Letting go is one of the hardest things you will ever do, but it is also one of the most powerful. Because letting go is not just about releasing someone else. It's about freeing yourself. It's about deciding that your happiness is not dependent on someone who has already walked away. But the question is, how do you actually do it? How do you let go of someone who still occupies your thoughts? How do you move forward when your heart is still holding on? Most people think letting go happens overnight, that one day you just wake up and suddenly you don't care anymore. But that's not how it works, is it? Because emotions don't just disappear. Feelings don't just vanish. Letting go is not an event, it is a process. And it begins with a decision to stop waiting, a decision to stop replaying the past, a decision to stop looking for closure in a place where you will never find it. Because let me tell you something, not everyone will give you closure. Some people will walk away without a goodbye. Some people will move on without an explanation. And if you keep waiting for them to bring you peace, you will never have it. Peace does not come from answers. It comes from acceptance. Accepting that what's gone is gone. Accepting that even though it hurts, it was necessary. Accepting that your future is not tied to someone who was never meant to stay. And I know what you're thinking, but what if they come back? What if things change? What if they realize they made a mistake? And my question to you is, why are you waiting for someone to choose you when you should have chosen yourself? Think about it. Why do we spend so much time holding on to people who let go of us so easily? Why do we waste our energy fighting for someone who didn't fight for us? Because we are afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that no one else will love us the same way. Afraid that if we truly let go, we will lose a part of ourselves. But let me tell you something. You are not losing yourself by letting go. You are finding yourself. You are taking back your power. You are refusing to let someone who left dictate your happiness. And that is when healing begins. Healing starts the moment you realize that your worth was never dependent on their presence. Healing starts when you stop checking their social media, when you stop replaying old memories like they still define your future. Healing starts when you finally say, I deserve better, and I'm moving forward. And when you make that choice, when you truly decide to let go, you will feel something you haven't felt in a long time: freedom. But here's the real challenge. Once you've let go, how do you stay strong? How do you resist the temptation to go back? Because the real test is not just in letting go, it's in not looking back. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next, because your journey is not over yet. You've made the decision to let go. You've told yourself, I deserve better, I'm moving forward. But now comes the hardest part, staying strong. Because letting go isn't just about making a decision. It's about keeping that decision when the memories start creeping back. It's about not looking back when loneliness whispers maybe you should check on them. Maybe they still care. Because the real test is not just in letting go. It's in not going back to what broke you. You see, the past has a strange way of calling you back, doesn't it? You'll be doing fine, feeling stronger, moving forward, and then suddenly you hear a song, you see a picture, you pass by a place that holds a memory, and just like that, your heart forgets why you left. And in that moment, you start wondering, did I make the right decision? Was it really that bad? Maybe I overreacted. Maybe things could be different now. And before you know it, you're right back where you started, holding on to something that was never meant for you. But let me ask you something. How many times will you touch the fire before you finally accept that it burns? How many times will you go back to what hurt you before you realize some doors are meant to stay closed? Because every time you reopen a door that was meant to be shut, you invite the same pain, the same confusion, the same heartbreak back into your life. And at some point, you have to choose yourself over your past. The truth is, you don't need closure to move on. You don't need an apology to heal. You don't need their approval to decide that you are worth more. Because the people who truly love you will never put you in a position where you have to beg for clarity, where you have to question your value, where you have to fight just to be seen. Real love does not require you to suffer just to prove that it's real. And if walking away felt like freedom, then going back is not an option. But I know what you're thinking. What if I never find love like that again? What if no one else understands me the way they did? And my question to you is, what if you're asking the wrong question? Instead of asking, what if I never find love like that again? Ask yourself, what if I finally find the love I deserve? Because you cannot receive what is meant for you while holding on to what is not. And sometimes the reason why the right person hasn't entered your life yet is because you're still occupied by the wrong one. So here's the real challenge. How do you move forward with confidence? How do you prepare yourself for the kind of love that won't require you to chase, to beg, or to question? Because the key to real love is not just in letting go of the past, it's in building a future that is worthy of the love you desire. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about next. You've let go. You've chosen yourself. You've decided that your past will not control your future, but now comes the most important part. What's next? Because healing is not just about leaving behind what broke you. It's about building something better. It's about preparing yourself for the kind of love that won't require you to suffer first, to prove your worth, or to fight for a place in someone's life. And the truth is, the kind of love you desire will never find you if you're still living with the mindset of your past. Most people make this mistake. They walk away from the wrong person, but they carry the same broken mindset into their future. They say they've moved on, but deep down, they're still afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. And because of that fear, they start settling. They start thinking, maybe love isn't for me. Maybe I should just take what I can get. Maybe being alone is easier. But let me tell you something. Just because you were hurt before does not mean you were meant to live in fear. Just because love failed you in the past does not mean it will fail you in the future. But if you do not heal, you will keep attracting the same pain in different people. So how do you prepare for the love you deserve? It starts with you. You have to become the person you want to attract. You have to develop the confidence, the self-worth, and the emotional strength that allows you to walk in love without losing yourself. Because love is not about finding someone to complete you. It's about becoming whole first, so that when the right person comes, they are an addition, not a solution. You don't need someone to save you. You don't need someone to fix you. You need to be in a place where love is a choice, not a crutch. And that means setting standards. That means knowing what you will and will not accept. That means understanding that love is not proven through suffering, it is proven through peace. If love makes you question your worth, it's not love. If love keeps you in confusion, it's not love. If love requires you to beg for attention, it's not love. Real love is consistent, intentional, and secure. And until you believe that you are worth that kind of love, you will continue settling for less. You are not too much. You are not asking for too much. You are simply asking the wrong person. And the moment you truly understand your worth, you will stop fighting for a place in someone's life. And you will start attracting someone who knows exactly where you belong. Your past does not define you. Your heartbreak does not define you. Your worth was never tied to who left. It is tied to who you become. And the moment you start walking in that truth is the moment you become unstoppable.